Saving all of your money in cash is a terrible idea, and unfortunately, this is the most common problem I see when talking with people about building wealth. By the end of today's video, you're going to understand why saving in cash is a bad idea, how much cash you should save, and what you should be doing with the rest of your cash. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Brandon, and over the past 10 years, I went from being tens of thousands of dollars in debt to building my wealth and achieving my definition of financial freedom. And I created Wealth Potion to share that journey with you all to help you achieve your financial goals by making finance fun and easy and approachable. And today's video is all about cash because unfortunately it's a very misunderstood topic that keeps a lot of people back from achieving their financial goals. So without further ado, let's dive in. Most people from a very young age are taught that saving is good. And of course, this makes intuitive sense. If you receive allowance from your parents, or if you have a part-time job when you're a teenager, you're told not to go and spend all of that money right away, because if you spend all of your money, you have no money left. The problem though is while this is helpful when you're first getting started and you want to make sure you're not spending more than you're making, if you keep all of your wealth in the form of cash, it's going to prevent you from actually building wealth. Why is this? If you've been subscribed to Wealth Potion for a while, you know this is a topic that we love to talk about because it is so important in your wealth building journey, and that is inflation. Inflation is commonly defined as the rising of prices. Right? When you go to the grocery store and you see that apples have become more expensive, that's inflation. But an equally accurate definition of inflation is the value of your money going down. Think of it this way. If you go to that grocery store and you see that apples have gone up in price, but you also see that meat has gone up in price, and you go to a restaurant and the meal has gone up in price, and you go to the gas station to fill up your tank and gasoline has gotten more expensive, and then you go home and it's the end of the week and you have to pay your rent and your rent has gotten more expensive. Yes, prices have risen and that is inflation. But you can also see that as your dollars being able to purchase fewer goods. And that is why inflation is sometimes defined as the value of your cash, or the purchasing power of your cash, decreasing over time. It's two sides of the same coin. They're saying the exact same thing. And so when you receive your paycheck, you pay for your expenses and then you save everything else in cash, whether that's physical cash or cash in a bank account, that cash is slowly losing value over time. And it's not a tiny number. In fact, the inflation rate over the past 100 years has been about 3.3 to 3.4%. So to put it very simply, your cash, when you put it into a shoebox or if you put it into your bank account, it is losing value at a rate of 3.3% per year on average. And what makes inflation so insidious is that the number in your bank account that you see doesn't change. So if you have $5,000 in your bank account, 1 year from now, it still will say $5,000. In fact, you might make $5 or $10 from interest from your bank. But that $5,000 1 year later can purchase fewer goods and services. A useful analogy here is like a hidden boss in a video game. It's one of those enemies that's invisible or slowly drains your life away without your character noticing. This can be particularly dangerous because it's not an obvious threat. And that's exactly how inflation works in real life. It doesn't deduct dollars from your bank account, it simply makes your dollars worth less over time. As mentioned, we do a lot of videos about inflation here at Wealth Potion because, again, it is a very important concept that will change the way that you invest and it will help you build your wealth the better you understand it. However, before we go and start throwing all of our cash away and investing it into things left, right, and center, we have to understand the real purpose of cash, because cash is a tool and it does have value. We just don't want to save all of our money in cash. So the first thing we're going to want to do today is build a budget. Simply put, a budget helps you understand how much money you're earning and how much money you're spending on a monthly basis. And we often use a monthly time period because a lot of our expenses are paid monthly. Our bills, our rent, our car payments, and so on. Building a budget is really quite simple. All you have to do is open up Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, or even just use pen and paper, and you want to write down your income every month. Likely is going to be your paycheck from your job. And then you're going to want to write down all of your expenses for the month. Things like rent, groceries, car payments, energy bills, and so on and so forth. And you're going to want to categorize them, right? If you go out and spend on shopping in various different places, you can put them all under the category of shopping. Ideally, you do this for a few months, but even after a single month, you should have a rough budget. You'll know how much money you're earning from your job, and you'll know how much money you're spending on your expenses. And ideally, your income is higher than your expenses. If your income is lower than your expenses, then a budget is incredibly important because you need to fix that fast. But hopefully at this point, your income is higher than your expenses. And that means every month you are saving some money and putting that aside somewhere. Now, again, the most common problem I hear when I speak with people about their financial situations is that extra cash that they have every month, they're just leaving it in the form of cash. So what should we be doing with that cash? Now that we have a budget, what we can do now is build what's called an emergency fund. An emergency fund is incredibly important for your personal finances, and it's really in the name. If you encounter an emergency, whether that's a health emergency, or a relative gets sick, or you lose your job, or there's a natural disaster, whatever it may be, you're going to want to have some money set aside that you can access really quickly to pay for that emergency. I shared in a recent video that I was diagnosed with cancer recently, and luckily I had cash set aside in an emergency fund that I was able to access very quickly to pay for my surgery and all of the treatment that I needed. And so this takes us to perhaps the most important message of this video, which is, why is cash valuable? It has to do with what's called liquidity. Liquidity is a fancy financial term, but really what it means is that cash is really easy to access. Something that is very liquid is easy to access. Something that is not liquid or illiquid means that it's harder to access. So for example, if you own a home, it's kind of difficult to sell your home and then turn it into cash so that you can pay for an emergency. Cash is extremely easy to access because you can literally just reach into your shoebox and grab it or withdraw it from your bank account. And every investment will have a different degree of liquidity. If there's interest, by the way, in understanding liquidity on a more advanced level, let me know. I'm happy to do a deeper dive video on it because it is a topic that a lot of professional investors will look at when considering investments. But for now, what's really the moral of the story here is that cash is extremely liquid, and that's why it is ideal for an emergency fund. Now comes an important question. How much money should you have in your emergency fund? We're now going to refer back to that budget we made, and we're going to look at our monthly expenses. And this is where your personal preference can come into play. Most people recommend having an emergency fund of anywhere between 3 months of expenses up to 12 months of expenses. And this is really up to your personal preference. You know, if you are a more risk-averse person, you want to be extra careful, basically, you may want to have 12 months set aside of your monthly expenses for an emergency. However, if you're more comfortable taking risk, or maybe you're younger, you don't have kids or dependents, maybe you're comfortable having just a 3-month emergency fund so that you can invest more of your money sooner. Again, this is a personal preference. It's not a recommendation I can make. It's something you have to decide on your own. But generally speaking, 3 to 12 months is a healthy range. And so once you've calculated that number, you've taken your monthly expenses, you've multiplied it by some number between 3 and 12, you'll get some total figure. And that is the amount of cash you'll want to have in your emergency fund. You can, of course, keep that emergency fund in the form of physical cash, or you can keep it in a bank account, but make sure it is an account that you can access quickly. There are some high yield savings accounts, for instance, where it locks up your money for, say, a year, and that would make it not very liquid. You want it to be something that you can access because that is the point of an emergency fund. Again, a useful video game analogy here is to think of cash as a health potion. You wouldn't go on an adventure without any health potions because your character might get killed and then you'll have a game over. But you also wouldn't spend all of your character's money and gold on health potions and just fill up your inventory with potions, because that would be a waste, and that's exactly how you should be thinking of cash. Have an emergency fund, definitely do that, but don't leave all of your money in cash. And that takes us to the last section of today's video, which is, okay, great, Brandon, I have an emergency fund. What should I do with the rest of my cash? And the short answer is that you should be investing it in assets. There are a ton of different assets that you can invest in. There's stocks, there's bonds, there's commodities, there's Bitcoin, there's crypto. There's so many things out there. And we are going to cover that in more detail in level 4. The reason for that, by the way, is that there are some important steps in level 2 and 3 that we need to cover before we start investing to make sure we're making the most money. So stay tuned for that. But in short, I don't want to keep you waiting until level 4. In general, the rule of thumb here is that you're investing it in some asset. The fact that you're investing it in any asset at all is more important than which asset you pick, because most assets generally go up in value over time. And again, that's because of inflation. And if you really want to skip to level 4, I highly recommend you don't, but I would look into index ETFs. There are a lot of videos online, and we will be posting one on Wealth Potion soon, but index ETFs are a very easy and simple way of investing that on a risk-adjusted basis performs very, very well. Now, the last thing I want to discuss with you all is why. Why is it that so many people get stuck in this level? And there's a few reasons for this. One is I do believe it's somewhat counterintuitive. Like I said, when we're young, we're taught to save our money, and saving generally sounds like a good thing, and it is, up until a certain point. And unfortunately, in the financial system that we live in, cash is designed to lose value over time. And it has done that for decades, if not centuries. And so that is why when you look at the best investors of the world, whether it's Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, they all say to invest your cash in assets that will increase in value over time. And unfortunately, not only is this just something we're taught as kids, but there's many other reasons people get stuck at level 1. Firstly, there's a lot of cultural values, right? If you're from East Asia or South Asia or even South America, a lot of cultures have it ingrained in them that saving cash is a good thing. Especially if you or your parents or grandparents came from a country that had a financial crisis, there is going to be a natural distaste and distrust of the financial system, and they're going to want to keep more of their money in cash. And unfortunately, we grow up with those cultural values. Another huge reason for this is that some people just simply don't have access to financial institutions. If you're watching this video on your laptop or on your iPhone, then you're not in this category. But unfortunately, there are billions of people around the world that do not have access to the internet, they do not have access to a bank, and they are forced to save their wealth in the form of cash. And last but not least, the reason that I am perhaps most passionate about is just simply a lack of financial education. There are also billions of people in the world that have the means to learn about finance. They have internet, they have banks and financial institutions available to them. They can open up a brokerage account and start investing. They simply don't know that cash is a melting ice cube and that it loses value over time. And unfortunately, these are things that a lot of people have had to learn through trial and error, through firsthand experience. And as I've mentioned before, my whole goal at Wealth Potion is to share all of the financial lessons that I learned through my journey, from going from tens of thousands of dollars in debt to now being financially free in my own way. And so to quickly recap, first and foremost, understand inflation. Recognize that your cash is a melting ice cube and it's losing value. 2, create a budget. Understand how much you're making every month and how much you're spending every month, and then use that budget to create an emergency fund. Have that cash set aside and then get ready to deploy all of that remaining cash into assets. But before we start investing right away, I will meet you at level 2, where we are going to discuss yet another common trap that a lot of people fall into early in their investing journey, and that is financial advisors. And we will cover why financial advisors are actually quite dangerous and can cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars throughout your wealth building journey. So thanks a lot for watching. If you made it all the way through, I really appreciate you. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear feedback. I'd love to hear your questions, and I will see you next time.